Alright, so this is a completely unexpected game reveal for me, and for the first time in years I feel properly excited for an FPS. First of all, Hell Let Loose has always been a game that stands apart from the mainstream FPS crowd, where most shooters chase fast-paced action, flashy kill streaks, or personal stat lines. Hell Let Loose has always been about something different: scale, authenticity, and teamwork. Since its full release in 2021, the game has built up a dedicated community of players who crave that authentic hardcore war experience. 50 players on each side, spread across sprawling maps, fighting battles that feel as chaotic, unpredictable, and exhausting as the real conflicts they depict. While its roots in World War II remain important, there's always been the question of where the series could go next. We got the answer pretty clearly. During the Future Games show, the team revealed Hell Let Loose Vietnam, a completely standalone and ambitious title that will transport players from the hedgerows of Europe and the frozen steppes of Russia into the dense jungles, rivers, and villages of Southeast Asia during one of the most divisive conflicts of the 20th century. The announcement confirmed that this isn't DLC or an expansion. It's a full new game built from the ground up, just like Hell Let Loose itself, designed to retain everything that made the original such a compelling experience while layering on mechanics, systems, and environments specific to the Vietnam War. It's set between 1965 and 1973, focusing on key moments of the conflict like Operation Starlight and Operation Piranha. It promises 6 sprawling maps at launch, all built to capture the unique challenges of fighting in a war without clear front lines. So what makes this move so exciting? To start with, the setting itself fundamentally changes how players will experience the game. In World War II, combat often centered around capturing fortified positions, pushing across open fields, or grinding through ruined cities. Vietnam is a different story entirely. The battlefields are jungles, swamps, rice paddies, and rivers. Villages connected by fragile bamboo bridges. And that's before you even consider the new tools and mechanics the developers are introducing. One of the most significant additions is the helicopter. Players will be able to climb aboard fully functional aircraft, not just as background scenery, but as essential elements of the battle. Helicopters can be used to drop squads into landing zones, deliver supplies to the front, perform reconnaissance, or unleash firepower from above. In the Gamescom hands-on session, the first thing that stood out was how different the flow of a match feels compared to the World War II maps. In the original, session began in the back of a helicopter, flying low over a jungle canopy with a squad packed in and waiting for a landing zone. The pilot dropped the squad onto a swampy riverbank, and within seconds, mortar fire was landing around the area. It wasn't a long build-up, the action picked up right away. The first objective was a small village that had to be secured. Approaching it meant moving across narrow bamboo bridges, which left players exposed. Tracer fire came in from the jungle tree line, and the only way forward was to keep moving and hope the squad covering fire held long enough. Communication between squads quickly became essential, with players calling out incoming mortars, flanking enemies, and patrol boats moving along the river. It had the same kind of tension that Hell Let Loose has always been known for, but in a completely different setting. Crossing rivers became one of the most memorable parts of the match. In the original game, movement across open terrain often depended on whether a bridge was intact or not. Here, rivers themselves turned into obstacles. Some squads used US patrol boats to cross with heavy firepower, while others tried swimming. Swimming worked, but it was risky. The moment players went into the water, they were fully exposed. Beyond what the demo showed directly, developers have shared more about what players can expect at launch. The game will include 6 large maps, each inspired by real-world operations and designed around different types of terrain. Some are focused on dense jungle fighting, while others use rice paddies, river networks, or small villages as central features. The difference in terrain is meant to shape strategy in the same way that the hedgerows or open fields did in the original Hell Let Loose, but with new layers added by verticality, water, and underground routes. Vehicles are set to play an even bigger role in Vietnam than they did before. US forces will have access to helicopters, APCs, and patrol boats, which change how squads approach both mobility and firepower. Air mobility in particular introduces more unpredictability, since reinforcements can arrive from directions that simply didn't exist in the World War II setting. The North Vietnamese army, meanwhile, has tools that reward patience and careful setup. Tunnel systems, camouflage positions, and traps. That asymmetry between factions should give matches a different rhythm depending on which side you're playing, with one side leaning into speed and force projection while the other looks for ways to disrupt and delay. The developers have emphasized that authenticity remains a focus. Weapons and uniforms are being built to reflect the period, and the sound design aims to make each weapon distinct. The addition of helicopters gave the session a very different pace as well. They weren't just transport tools, they could change the shape of a battle quickly. If a helicopter managed to land behind enemy lines, it meant a whole squad could suddenly appear where they weren't expected. At the same time, they were vulnerable targets, drawing a lot of attention from anti-aircraft fire and small arms on the ground. They added another thing to watch for, and another way to think about how reinforcements might reach the front. The North Vietnamese army brought an entirely different style of play during the demo. Instead of relying on vehicles and air power, they leaned into mobility and stealth. Tunnel systems allowed them to move unseen across the battlefield. In one example, a US squad thought they had cleared a village, only to be attacked from behind less than a minute later by soldiers emerging from tunnels. It didn't feel unfair and more like an authentic reflection of how unpredictable the fighting in this setting could be. For the NVA, it rewarded players who were patient and willing to set up ambushes rather than charging straight in. Visibility in the jungle was one of the main concerns going in, but the new lighting and foliage design made the maps readable while still dense and atmospheric. You could lose sight of enemies if you weren't paying attention, but it wasn't the kind of frustration where the graphics were working against you. It felt balanced between realism and playability. Audio design was another highlight. The difference between ME16 fire and AK-47 burst was immediately noticeable, and that kind of detail helped with awareness. Mortars echoed in the distance, helicopters cut across the soundscape, and squad chatter added to the sense of being in the middle of something chaotic but organized. It encouraged players to listen carefully, not just watch their surroundings. Performance in the demo was surprisingly smooth, even in large-scale firefights with dozens of players, mortars, and vehicles all active at once. The frame rate held steady. For a game that relies on large maps and high player counts, that stability felt like an important step forward from the original. The overall impression from the session was that Vietnam keeps the foundation of the series intact but adds enough new elements to make it feel fresh. The scale is still there, the teamwork is still critical, and the combat is still unforgiving. But the jungle setting, the rivers, the helicopters, and the tunnels all change how battles play out. It isn't just a reskin of the World War II maps. The new mechanics push players to think differently and adapt to new challenges. For fans of the series, it's familiar enough to feel comfortable but new enough to be worth the leap. And for people who haven't played Hell Let Loose before, Vietnam could serve as an approachable starting point, with its unique mechanics and distinct atmosphere setting it apart from other tactical shooters. The demo didn't answer every question. Balancing vehicles like helicopters or making sure tunnel systems don't become frustrating will take time, but the foundation seems strong, and the Gamescom session showed that the new era has a lot of potential.